The moment I stepped into the private room at the back of the restaurant, I knew this wasn't the casual family brunch my mom had promised. The lights were too bright, the table too clean, and there was a thick stack of paperwork sitting in the middle next to a pen that wasn't mine. I felt my throat tighten as I noticed the man in a suit already seated, laptop open, eyes on me instead of the menu. My mom smiled like this was all normal and said we just needed to talk about what is fair after my dad's death. I am Sarah, 28. I work remote in tech, and I know enough about contracts and online banking to recognize a setup when I see one. Still, nothing prepared me for hearing that this stranger was her lawyer, and that the papers in front of me were drafted to redistribute my inheritance so everyone could share. He slid the agreement across the table. My mom folded her hands like a judge, and the rest of the people in the room stared at me as if I was already guilty of something. He said all I had to do was sign and transfer most of what my dad left me for the good of the family. When I refused, the tone changed. The smiles disappeared. They started hinting at dragging me into court, ruining my credit, making this very hard for me if I did not cooperate. My heart was pounding, but I could feel my dad's voice in the back of my mind reminding me who actually had the law on their side. I looked around the table, counting slowly under my breath, then out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You are a lot of people. They frowned, confused, and that is when I smiled for the first time that day. Funny thing is, I said, I only brought one person too. If you want to know who walked in after that, and how this little family meeting turned into the worst decision my mom ever made, keep listening until the end. I was not always the girl sitting in a private room across from a lawyer, counting people like they were chess pieces. For most of my life, I was just a kid from a quiet suburb in San Diego who thought family meant game nights, Costco runs, and my dad's terrible jokes about JavaScript. My dad, Richard, was a software engineer at a small tech company. He was the kind of guy who packed leftovers for lunch and drove the same old Honda for years because it still works. My mom, Laura, hated that. She wanted the house in the gated community, the new hybrid parked in the driveway, the Instagram vacations that made everyone else jealous. When I was 15, the gap between them finally split open. I still remember the night they sat me down at the kitchen table. My dad had a stack of printed bank statements. My mom had a Pinterest board of vacation homes open on her tablet. She told me she was tired of just getting by. He told her he was tired of pretending they could afford a life they didn't have. California is a community property state, which basically meant the court looked at everything they had built together and sliced it down the middle. My mom saw it as a chance to finally upgrade her life. My dad saw it as losing half of everything he had worked for, and somehow still being responsible for alimony and child support. After the divorce, I stayed mostly with my dad in a modest condo near Carlsbad. It was nothing fancy, but I could hear the ocean if I opened my bedroom window at night. On Fridays, he would let me pick dinner from DoorDash, and we would eat tacos straight from the containers while watching Netflix on the couch. He showed me how to use budgeting apps, explained what a 401k was, and why credit scores mattered more than designer bags. While other kids' parents bragged about new cars, my dad bragged about paying off his credit card every month. My mom, on the other hand, moved up the coast to Orange County and seemed to reinvent herself overnight. She married Victor, a charming real estate agent who specialized in selling homes that looked like something out of a TV show. Suddenly, her Facebook was full of photos from backyard barbecues and wine tastings. She had 2 new kids in her life, Mia and Ethan, and they all wore matching outfits in their Christmas photos. I was technically still her daughter, but most days I felt like a guest star in the perfect family she was trying to build. Every time I scrolled past her posts, it was the same thing. So proud of my amazing family, blessed, living my best life. I was never in the pictures. She didn't call to ask how my exams went or what I wanted to do after high school. She called to tell me Mia had made varsity or Ethan had won some tournament. The only time my name came up was when she complained to my dad about money. My dad would come home from those conversations a little quieter, a little more tired, but he always bounced back by turning on some old movie and making popcorn on the stove. On weekends, we went hiking in the local canyons or drove up the coast for cheap day trips. He'd point out houses on the cliffs and say, "People get obsessed with these, but they still go to bed with the same problems as everyone else." He kept our life simple, but it felt honest. At night, when I worried that I was somehow the reason everything fell apart, he would sit at the edge of my bed and tell me, "You don't owe anyone your future just because they share your last name. Build something real, something that belongs to you." Those words sounded dramatic back then, like something a movie dad would say. I didn't know he was quietly meeting with a lawyer, updating paperwork, making sure that if anything ever happened to him, I wouldn't be at the mercy of my mother's idea of fair. I thought the worst part of my life was already behind me when the divorce was finalized and everyone moved on. I had no idea that one late-night drive on the I-5 years later would take my dad away and turn those quiet money lessons into a full-blown war over everything he left me. When you grow up with a dad who double-checks every seatbelt and reroutes around traffic just to be safe, you never think car accident is how his story ends. But that is exactly what happened. One rainy Tuesday night, he was driving back down the I-5 after staying late at the office to finish a release. A drowsy driver drifted across lanes. There was a chain reaction, and by the time the highway patrol called me, my dad was already gone. The world went silent in that way it does, when someone pulls the plug on your entire life. The funeral was small and simple, just like he would have wanted. A few co-workers from his tech company, a couple of neighbors from the condo building, and me standing there trying to breathe around the knot in my chest. My mom showed up dressed in black like a movie widow, Victor at her side, Mia and Ethan standing a little behind them like props. She cried loudly enough for everyone to hear, hugging people she had barely spoken to in years, telling anyone who would listen how heartbroken she was. I stood next to his urn, thinking, "You didn't love this man. You loved the life he could not give you." After the service, while people were still drifting toward the parking lot, a woman in a navy blazer and practical heels approached me. She introduced herself as Elena, my dad's attorney. We sat at a metal picnic table outside the church, the air thick with the smell of flowers and coffee. She explained that my dad had been very thorough, that he had updated his will more than once after the divorce, that he had been concerned about potential pressure from my mother. That was her polite way of saying he knew my mom would come for his money the second he was gone. According to the will, everything that was unquestionably his separate property after the divorce, plus the assets he'd built since, came to me. The condo in Carlsbad, his tech stocks, some Apple, some index funds, his IRA and 401k rollovers. It was not billionaire money, but it was the careful, solid wealth of a man who had spent his whole life being responsible. I should have felt guilty hearing that it all went to me. Instead, I just felt sad and weirdly proud, like he had managed to protect me even from beyond the grave. Elena told me about the California probate process, how the court would basically validate the will, oversee the transfer of assets, make sure no one could challenge it without real grounds. She looked me in the eye and said, "Your father was very clear, Sarah. He wanted you to have control of your future without interference." The word interference hung in the air like a storm cloud, and right on cue, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom, a long paragraph about how we need to talk, how your father would want you to think about the whole family, how we should handle his estate like adults. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She asked when we could discuss numbers. At first, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I answered politely, said we could talk after probate was underway, mentioned that Dad had an attorney. She ignored that part and went straight to asking rough estimates of what he had left, like she was pricing a listing. When I didn't respond quickly enough, the guilt tripping started. She reminded me of all the times she had taken care of me when I was a kid, how expensive my teenage years were, how Mia and Ethan needed help with college. It was always the same phrase on repeat. You have to think about the family. What she meant was her new family. I forwarded the messages to Elena. She told me not to share specific balances or documents, not to sign anything, not to agree to any private deals. She said that if my mom wanted to challenge the will, she could hire her own lawyer and file in court. But based on the paperwork my dad had prepared, it would be a long shot. I decided to trust the woman my dad had trusted, even if it meant disappointing the woman who gave birth to me. That is when my mom's tone shifted from emotional manipulation to mild threats. She started leaving voicemails about how lawyers were expensive, how this could drag on for years, how my credit could be affected if there was a messy legal fight. She would sprinkle in something sentimental like, "I'm just trying to look out for you," before sliding into, "You don't want this to get ugly, do you?" It was like listening to a sales pitch wrapped in a Hallmark card. The more I held my ground, the more desperate she sounded. I stopped answering her calls and wrote everything down. Dates, times, what she said. My dad had taught me that money fights make people reckless, and reckless people leave evidence. A few weeks after the funeral, probate officially confirmed the will. The condo, the accounts, everything moved into my name. Elena sent me a neat folder with legal copies and a calm email about next steps. Within 24 hours, my mom emailed me too. The subject line was family meeting, and the body was full of phrases like clear the air, discuss options, and find a fair solution. She said it would just be us, a small group, nothing formal. She suggested a nice restaurant in Irvine, said she would make a reservation in a private room so we could talk openly. I stared at the email for a long time, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach. My dad had done everything right, followed every rule, and somehow I still felt like prey being invited to walk calmly into a trap. I forwarded the email to Elena with one simple question. "Will you come with me?" Elena didn't even hesitate. She called me instead of replying by email, her voice steady in a way that made my shoulders finally drop a little. She said she would be there, that I was not going to walk into any meeting alone, and that if my mother wanted to play games with legal documents, she had picked the wrong opponent. The day of the family meeting, I drove up to Irvine with a knot in my stomach and a folder in my bag. Inside were copies of the will, the probate confirmation, and a notepad where I had written dates and summaries of every voicemail and guilt-soaked text my mother had sent since the funeral. It was my little shield of paper against years of being told I was ungrateful whenever I didn't roll over. We agreed on a simple plan. I would go in first, see who was there, see what they put on the table. Elna would wait nearby and come in when I texted her. That way, my mom wouldn't have the chance to spin it as an ambush, even though that was exactly what she had planned for me. The restaurant was the kind of place with awkwardly quiet music and water glasses that never seemed to empty. A hostess led me past couples on dates and business lunches to the back, where a frosted glass door marked private was already closed. My heart thudded against my ribs as she opened it, and I stepped into the room I had described when the story began. My mom sat at the head of the table in a black blouse, posture perfect, like she was chairing a board meeting. Victor sat to her right in a blazer that looked expensive, but a little too tight, as if he had grown into a different version of himself than the one who bought it. Mia and Ethan were there too, on the opposite side of the table next to a man in a gray suit with a sleek laptop open in front of him. No one had menus. There was a pitcher of water, a neat stack of papers, and a pen aligned perfectly on top. "Sarah, you made it," my mom said, as if I had shown up early to help decorate for a party. "We just want to talk." The man in the suit stood up and offered his hand. He introduced himself as Daniel, an attorney, helping the family explore options regarding your father's estate. The way he said family made it sound like everyone in the room had lost the same thing I had, like we were all equals here, just trying to divvy up grief. I sat down slowly and noticed the top page of the stack in front of me. It had my name on it and more legal language than any normal person would voluntarily read over brunch. Terms like redistribution, voluntary agreement, and irrevocable. My stomach flipped. "Before you panic," my mom said, leaning forward with a practiced sympathetic look. "We just want to make sure everyone is provided for. Your father's will didn't consider the reality of the family now. Things are different." She gestured to Mia and Ethan as if they were line items in a budget. "College is expensive. Life is expensive. This is just about fairness." Daniel took over, explaining that the document was a family settlement agreement that would allow me to transfer a reasonable portion of the inheritance into a shared trust. Reasonable, according to the numbers printed in stark black ink, meant about 65%. He said it in the same tone someone might use to suggest splitting a check. I kept my face neutral, but inside I could feel heat rising. My dad had worked overtime, driven that damn I-5 at night, skipped vacations for years, and now I was being told that honoring his choices was selfish. "No one is trying to take anything from you," my mom added, which was almost funny considering the contract literally existed to take things from me. "We just don't want this to become a long, ugly legal fight. That would hurt your credit, your future. This way, we handle it privately. Like adults." I thought about the texts she had sent, the voicemails where her voice sharpened whenever she said the word fair. I thought about my dad sitting at the edge of my bed telling me I didn't owe anyone my future. I took a breath. "So," I said carefully, "if I don't sign this, what happens?" The temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. Victor shifted in his seat. Mia stared at the table. Ethan kept looking at his phone like he wished he was anywhere else. Daniel folded his hands and gave me a look that might have been meant to pass for kind. "Then this could become complicated," he said. "Your mother could contest certain aspects of the probate. There could be long delays, legal fees, public records. It might impact your credit or your ability to move quickly with the assets. Conflict is stressful. We're trying to avoid that." My mom jumped back in, her voice tightening just enough to slip the mask. "We're giving you a chance to show you care about this family. You're not the only one who lost something, Sarah. Mia is applying to colleges. Ethan has his whole future ahead of him. We are asking you to do the right thing." I looked at each of them. The lawyer ready to bill by the hour. Victor, who had married into my mother's hunger for status. 2 teenagers who had grown up in a world where I was a footnote. And my mother, who could cry on command and talk about love while pushing a pen toward my hand. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, but my voice came out calm. "How many of you are there again?" I asked softly, mostly to myself at first. My mom frowned. "What does that have to do with anything?" I let my gaze slide around the table as if I was counting place settings. "1," I said, nodding toward my mom. "2, to Victor. 3, 4, for Mia and Ethan." I paused on Daniel. 5. The room went quiet except for the low hum of the restaurant outside the door. "You are a lot of people," I said finally, meeting my mom's eyes. Confusion flickered across her face, then irritation. "Sarah, this isn't a joke." I smiled, and for the first time since I walked in, I felt something other than fear. I felt ready. "You're right," I said. "It's not." I reached down, pulled my phone from my bag, and tapped out a single word I had already typed into a draft before I arrived. Then I set the phone face down next to the untouched pen. Funny thing is, I added, I only brought one person too. A soft knock sounded on the door a few seconds later, sharp and precise. The hostess opened it just enough to let a woman in a navy blazer step through, a familiar folder in her hand, and a calm, professional smile on her face. "Hi, Laura," Elena said politely. "I hear you wanted to talk about Sarah's inheritance." After that meeting, my mom stopped pretending to be hurt and started acting like someone who had just lost a bid on a very expensive house. She walked out of the restaurant stiff and silent, Victor at her elbow, her lawyer mumbling something about revisiting options. Elena and I stayed behind for a few minutes, just long enough for my hands to stop shaking. She told me I had handled it exactly right, that I had every legal right to say no, and that if my mother tried anything else, we would deal with it. I wanted to believe that was the end of it. For about 3 days, my phone was quiet. No guilt-tripping texts, no long voicemails. I almost let myself think maybe the shock of having a real attorney walk in had scared my mom straight. Then the messages started again, but colder this time. She sent a long text about how disappointed she was, how ashamed my father would be, how money has changed you. She hinted that if I kept being stubborn, I might regret how complicated things could get with accounts and paperwork. It did not sound like a threat of more brunch meetings. It sounded like a warning from someone who had finally accepted she could not get what she wanted by asking nicely. I forwarded everything to Elena. She told me to keep every message and not respond. Then she added something that made my stomach twist. If she can't move you emotionally, she might try to move you financially. That night, I sat at my kitchen counter with my laptop open and went through every account I had. I changed passwords, turned on two-factor authentication for my bank and investment apps, checked security questions, and froze my credit with the 3 major bureaus. It was the grown-up version of barricading the door, one app notification at a time. My dad used to say, "In this country, your data is worth more than the cash in your wallet." I never really felt the weight of that until I was clicking through settings with my heart pounding, imagining my mother whispering my childhood address and first pet's name into some login screen. A few days later, I got an email that looked exactly like the kind my bank usually sent. Same logo, same colors, same subject line template. Important, action required. The only reason I hesitated before clicking was because the timing felt wrong. I had just updated my security, and the universe is rarely that on the nose. I hovered over the link instead of tapping it. The URL was close but not quite right, the kind of fake domain you only notice if you are already suspicious. My skin went cold. Someone had not just guessed my bank, they had paid attention. I called the bank directly using the number on the back of my card. They confirmed they had not sent any security emails that week, and there had been at least one failed login attempt from an unfamiliar device on one of my investment accounts. The representative helped me lock everything down even further, then told me to file a report with local law enforcement and the bank's fraud department. It felt surreal to sit in my small living room, Netflix paused on some dumb sitcom, while I explained to a detective over the phone that my own mother might be trying to fish her way into my inheritance. He suggested I also submit a complaint through the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3. It sounded intense, like something people did when strangers overseas stole their crypto, not when their mom lived an hour up the freeway. Still, I filled out the form, attached screenshots, emails, and the bank's notes about failed logins. Elena reviewed everything and told me I did the right thing. "If this escalates," she said, "you'll want a clear trail that shows you didn't just imagine this." The next step was protecting the one thing I had never really thought about as part of my security: my actual front door. I ordered a Ring doorbell camera and a couple of small security cameras during my lunch break one day, the way some people impulse buy shoes. They arrived 2 days later in cheerful cardboard boxes. Installing them made me feel ridiculous and empowered at the same time. I walked around the condo with my phone, checking angles, making sure every door and the area near the building's mailbox were in view. It felt dramatic until I imagined my mom leaning over my mailbox or sitting in her car out front, connecting to my building's guest Wi-Fi and pretending the internet itself owed her a cut. For a little while, nothing happened. The cameras sent me notifications when the mail carrier came or when my neighbor dragged his trash cans past my door, but that was it. I went back to my normal routine: remote work, yoga videos on YouTube, late night scrolling on Reddit. One night, unable to sleep, I posted a long, anonymized version of my situation on our legal advice. I changed names and locations, but I told the truth about the inheritance, the pressure, the fake family meeting, the weird bank email. The comments flooded in. People told me to listen to my attorney, not to meet my mother alone, to keep everything in writing, to treat this like a crime, not a misunderstanding. A few even admitted they had gone through similar things when a parent died and money was involved. Reading those stories made me feel less crazy and more focused. I was not overreacting. I was responding. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was in a Zoom stand-up, my phone buzzed with a ring alert. Someone was in front of my building. I glanced at the thumbnail and saw a car I recognized from years of school pickups. Victor's SUV. My chest tightened. I turned my camera off on Zoom, pretending I was having connection issues, and opened the live feed. Victor was parked at the curb, engine idling. He had his laptop open on his knees, the glow of the screen lighting up his face. A second later, another notification popped up. Motion detected near the mailboxes. The second camera showed my mom standing there, phone pressed to her ear, glancing around like she was checking if anyone was watching. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the tiny audio feed. I watched my mom talk into her phone, then looked toward Victor's car. At almost the exact same time, my banking app sent a push notification. Unrecognized device attempting to access your account. It was like watching coordinates line up on a map. My mother, at my mailbox. Victor, in his car outside my building with a laptop. My account, pinging me that someone was trying to break in. I hit screen record on my phone and let it run. Later, I pulled the logs from my bank's website showing the time, IP address, and failed login attempt. The timestamps matched the ring footage down to the minute. I sent everything to Elena: the videos, the logs, the IC3 report confirmation. She didn't text back this time. She called, and her voice was sharper than I had ever heard it. "This isn't just harassment anymore," she said. "This is attempted identity theft. They're not just pushing you, they're breaking the law." The next day, with her help, I filed a formal police report and updated my complaint with the FBI's cyber unit. It felt like crossing a line I could never uncross, but I kept replaying the image of my mother at my mailbox and Victor hiding in his car like a teenager trying to steal Wi-Fi. Whatever this was, it stopped being family drama the moment they tried to put their hands on the money my father left me by pretending to be me. I had spent months feeling like I was always one step behind their schemes. Now, for the first time, I had something they couldn't spin away with tears or guilt: hard, ugly digital proof. And that was the moment this stopped being a private war and turned into a case a judge would have to look at, with my mother and her perfect new life under the harshest light possible. I always thought courtrooms only looked like that on TV, all polished wood and heavy air, but the real one in downtown San Diego felt even heavier, like the walls themselves had seen too many people lie and break down and pretend they were sorry. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Elena, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at the flat screen across from the judge's bench. That was where my life was about to play in high definition. My front door, my mailbox, my inheritance, and the people who decided they deserved it more than I did. On the other side of the room, my mom sat next to Victor. Her hair done, makeup perfect, outfit carefully chosen to scream responsible citizen instead of woman who tried to get into her daughter's accounts. Their lawyer was a different guy this time, older, more polished, the kind of man who probably believed he could talk anyone into anything. Mia and Ethan were in the second row behind them, dressed like this was a school assembly. They would not be testifying, but they could not pretend they did not know why their parents were here. When the judge walked in, everyone stood. I felt my knees wobble slightly, like they were remembering that they used to belong to a kid, not someone about to listen to her own mother be described as a criminal. The prosecutor laid it out calmly. Attempts to access protected financial accounts, fraudulent emails, coordinated behavior captured on video and in digital logs. He did not use dramatic language. He just stacked facts on top of facts until there was a tower I knew my mother could never climb down from. Elena had prepared me for everything. I had seen the exhibits ahead of time, but something about watching the screen flicker on and seeing my front door from the perspective of that little camera made my stomach twist. The video showed the date, the timestamp, that dull gray afternoon. It showed my mom standing at the mailboxes with her phone pressed to her ear, glancing around like she was doing something as small as gossiping, not as big as trying to steal my name. Then the feed switched to the angle on the street. Victor, in his SUV, laptop open, the blue-white glow lighting up his face as his fingers moved on the keyboard. A fractional delay, and the prosecutor pointed out how, right at that moment, my bank logs recorded a failed login attempt from an unfamiliar device. Then they displayed the screenshot of my banking app notification, the one that had made my heart hammer while I watched the live ring feed. The timestamps lined up almost perfectly. It was like watching a crime documentary where the villain was played by your own family. Their lawyer tried to spin it. He said there had been a misunderstanding, that my mother had simply been checking on paperwork, that Victor had been helping with online access, that they thought they were logging into some old joint account from the marriage. He tried to paint me as paranoid, resentful, making a drama out of grief and confusion. I just sat there and listened, because I knew what was coming next. Elena stood up, calm and precise. She reminded the court that the will had been fully probated, that my father's accounts had been in his sole name, then mine. No joint access, no gray area. She put up the emails, the fake bank link, the IC3 complaint, the messages where my mom had hinted at accounts and paperwork becoming complicated if I did not cooperate. She played one of the voicemails where my mother's voice slipped just enough to show the threat under the sugar. By the time I took the stand, the story was already clear. My job was not to perform. It was just to tell the truth in the same steady way my dad would have told a bug report. I explained the family meeting, the settlement agreement they had tried to push in that private room, the pressure, the threats, the sudden appearance of phishing emails after I refused. I explained how I had changed passwords, frozen my credit, talked to my bank, been told there were failed logins. I described watching the ring footage in real time and feeling every piece click together. The prosecutor asked me how it felt to realize my own mother was behind it. My throat tightened, but I answered honestly. I said it felt like watching someone reach into my chest and try to take the last piece of my dad I had left. When everything was finally submitted and both sides had said what they needed to say, the judge took a long time flipping through the paperwork. You could feel the room holding its breath. My mother stared straight ahead, face tight, eyes shiny in a way I no longer trusted. When the judge spoke, his voice was steady, almost bored, but the words hit like a hammer. He said the evidence showed clear attempts to gain unauthorized access to my accounts using deceptive methods. He talked about how using personal familiarity and prior knowledge to impersonate someone is not a family misunderstanding, it is fraud. He acknowledged that no large sums had been successfully taken, but that did not erase the intent or the effort. He found my mother and Victor guilty of charges related to attempted identity theft and fraud. He did not sentence them to some dramatic TV show prison term. Instead, he did something that, in the real world, can hurt longer. He imposed a heavy fine, tens of thousands of dollars, plus restitution for my legal costs. He put them on probation, which meant every financial move they made for years would be watched. He ordered them to complete a program on financial crimes, and then he granted the restraining order Elena had requested, barring them from contacting me directly or indirectly for 5 years, barred from coming near my home or workplace or messing with anything tied to my name. He also noted Victor's real estate license and referred the case to the licensing board. I saw the exact moment Victor understood what that meant. His shoulders sagged like someone had just taken a key piece off the board. No license, no luxury listings, no easy commissions to fund the lifestyle my mother had curated online. What really surprised me was not the legal part. It was the silence after. When we stepped out into the hallway, there were no dramatic screams or thrown punches. My mom did not chase me down to beg. She just stood there, staring at a spot on the floor, her carefully arranged life crumbling in ways she could not fix with a filter or a caption. For years, she had posted about being blessed. Now, she avoided everyone's eyes like she finally understood that blessings are not something you steal from your own child. I walked past her without stopping, not to be cruel, but because there was nothing left to say that the judgment had not already said better. For the first time since my dad died, I felt like the ground under my feet belonged to me again. Not to my mother's version of family, not to her hunger for fairness, but to the girl my dad had raised to understand that real value is something you protect, even when the person trying to take it shares your last name. In the weeks after the verdict, my life did not magically transform into some glossy after picture. But for the first time in a long time, the silence in my condo felt like peace instead of loneliness. I woke up without checking my phone in a panic, half expecting some new threat or guilt-soaked voicemail. The only notifications I saw were the usual: Slack pings from work, emails from my manager about a new sprint, reminders from my budgeting app. My accounts were safe. My doorbell camera showed nothing more dramatic than Amazon packages and my neighbor walking his dog. It was strange how normal safety looked once you finally had it back. With the legal mess behind me, Elena helped me sit down and go through everything my dad had left, not as targets on a map, but as tools for a real future. We shifted some of his carefully chosen tech stocks into broad index funds, set up an emergency fund, and created a plan for my retirement that would have made him proud. Instead of feeling guilty every time I opened my banking app, I started to feel capable. Like I was not just holding on to what he gave me, but actually growing it. I kept my job in tech, working remote from the same condo we had once shared. Some mornings I would sit at the small dining table with my laptop, coffee from the drive-through Starbucks down the street, and look toward the empty chair where he used to sit with his own mug and a stack of printed code. It hurt, but in a clean way, like a scar that had finally healed over. Therapy helped with the rest. I found a counselor who specialized in grief and family trauma. Someone who did not flinch when I said, "My mom tried to steal my inheritance," out loud. We talked about boundaries, about how family is supposed to protect you, not burn you for parts, about how I could carry my dad's memory without carrying every bad decision my mother made. Slowly, the knot in my chest loosened. I realized I had spent years trying to earn a place in a version of family that had never really included me. Losing that fantasy hurt less than I thought it would. It was like waking up from a dream where you were always the extra chair at the table. I started showing up in different places instead. A local yoga studio where no one knew anything about my last name, just that I always grabbed a mat by the window. A community meetup for women in tech who traded stories about bad code and worse bosses, but also about supporting each other's careers and goals. Online, I drifted away from doom scrolling and towards communities that actually helped people. I messaged a moderator on our personal finance and asked how I could give back without oversharing. Together, we cleaned up my old anonymous post on our legal advice and turned it into a cautionary tale. How to document financial abuse, how to protect your accounts, how to recognize when family conversations about money have crossed the line into manipulation. With part of the restitution and a portion of my inheritance, I made a donation to an organization that supports victims of identity theft. It felt right that some of the money my mom tried to steal ended up helping people whose lives had been ripped apart by the same kind of crime. I did not blast it on social media. I just kept the confirmation email in a folder labeled, "Dad would like this." As for my mom, the consequences the judge handed down did exactly what they were supposed to. The fines and legal fees forced her to sell the big house she used to brag about online. Victor's license issues meant fewer deals, less income, fewer posts about closing another dream home. Their Instagram feed slowed, then shifted from champagne and sunsets to vague quotes about starting over and learning who really has your back. None of those posts had my name on them. The restraining order kept them out of my inbox and away from my front door. Mia and Ethan did not reach out, and I did not go looking for them. Maybe one day, when they are older and sift through the pieces on their own, they will see what really happened. Maybe they will hate me for it, or maybe they will quietly understand. Either way, that choice belongs to them, not to me. People sometimes say, "But she's still your mother," like biology is some kind of moral shield. What I learned is that shared DNA does not give anyone the right to your future. Love is proven in how people protect you when it is inconvenient, not in how loudly they say family when money is on the table. My dad's real inheritance was not the condo or the accounts. It was the spreadsheet he taught me how to read, the credit score he told me to guard, the idea that integrity matters even when no one is watching. It was the courage to walk into a room full of people who wanted to take everything and say no. If you have never been through a family fight over money, I hope you never do. But if you are sitting there right now with a knot in your stomach, watching someone you love try to twist your loyalty into leverage, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not selfish for protecting what is yours. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. You are not a bad daughter or son for refusing to be scammed by someone who happens to share your last name. In a world where so much of our life is tied to passwords, accounts, and paper trails, the most important thing you own is your ability to say, "No, this stops here." My mom tricked me into a family meeting, and she walked away thinking she could threaten me into handing over my inheritance. What she did not count on was that my dad had already given me something worth more than every dollar she chased. The knowledge that real family protects your future, they do not try to steal it.